welcome back to my channel, LSB Designs. I'm Laura and it's great to have you here with me today. So today I'm going to be doing a resin coaster project, and the resin for that I'm using is the Dipon Epoxyplast 3D B20 Dual Cast, and into that I'm going to be adding silver leaf flakes, Arteza mica powder in sapphire blue, and some black mica powder into that sapphire blue, just to deepen it a little bit, because I wanted a colour that was more towards navy, but unfortunately I don't have a navy pigment powder paste or mica powder, so I thought if I added a bit of the black mica powder in, it would just deepen it enough to get the colour that I was after. So I've already got my resin mixed up and I've just heated it with my mini heat gun just to help get rid of some of those bubbles. It's not particularly bubbly, that resin. It's quite nice to work with, and as the title suggests, it does come out very clear, like a jewel. But as with any resin, when you're mixing it, you're always going to get some bubbles as you've mixed. So that's why I was using my heat gun. So I've just divided my resin into two small silicone cups, and they're about 100 mils capacity each, ready for adding into my silver leaf and mica powders. Now, before you start pouring anything into your moulds, you need to make sure that they are nice and clean. You don't want any bits of dirt, dust, glitter, mica, anything like that left over. And the best thing to use is just a piece of tape, and just go over your moulds to make sure that there's nothing left in there. You want it nice and clean. So here we go. I'm now starting to add my silver leaf to one of my cups. As you can see, I'm using some tweezers just to help tease it apart a bit. Don't want any big lumps of silver leaf in there. As beautiful as it is, I want nice small pieces that float around and give it a sparkly look. I don't want a big chunk in there. So when you get it biting these tubs already in flakes, unfortunately, because it's so light and it flies everywhere, so be really careful with that. They compress it and that makes it stick together. Now, that's great for getting more product for your money. Not so great when you're wanting it for something like resin and you're wanting it into smaller pieces. So I'm just carefully pulling it apart to ensure that I don't get any of the big pieces. Some you may still get, but you can always remove those. Now, what I'm after is a nice amount of the silver flake floating in the resin. I don't want it to be overwhelmed, but likewise I don't want it to be sparse and look like I shouldn't have bothered. So I want a nice amount in there. So I've given it a good stir just to make sure all the silver leaf is coated in resin and it's mixed through nicely. Had a look, decided there's not enough in there, so I've added a small amount more, and I'm just going to give that another mix, because as I said, we don't want any of it to be not coated in resin. We want it to float about nicely. And as I'm mixing it, I find a lump of silver leaf that's stuck together. There you go. So all I'm doing is pulling that out because I don't want that big clump in there. So that's now removed. Have another look, and it's just the right amount. So nicely covered throughout the resin without it being overwhelming. So as I said before, it's incredibly light and fly away, so be careful when you're taking the lid on or off. You don't want it to go everywhere, because that stuff is a nightmare for flying around. It's like mica powder. So on to the next cup. So I'm just adding some of the mica powder. Is in Sapphire Blue by Arteza, and I've just added 2 heaped spoons, these tiny little teaspoons of the Sapphire Blue, and to that, to deepen it, I'm adding some of the black. So I've added about half of one of those little teaspoons in, and I'm going to give it a good stir now, because you don't want any mica powder clumps. So you need to make sure you give it a really good stir, that it's all incorporated and nice and smooth in the resin. If you get lumps, then it tends to affect your finished result. You either get it floating up, or you end up with bits stuck to the bottom of your mould, which then shows up in your final piece, and that's the last thing we want. So not quite dark enough, so I've added another half a mini teaspoon of the black in there to give it a bit more of depth to it, and I'm having a good look, and that is much closer to the colour I wanted. So sorry about the camera jumping there. That's because I forgot I'd not put my ring light on above my camera, so I'm just switching that on for you. So I'm just making sure it's all well incorporated. There we go, so ready to pour now. So what I'm going to do to start off with is give my spoons a wipe, pop them to one side, and then start with the blue. So I'm pouring that around the edge of the mould. I'm putting a bit in each one, and then I can go back and fill them up further once I know I've got enough in each mould. Because the last thing I want to do is pour lots into a few of the moulds, get to the last one, and then not be enough and have to make up more powder and resin. So I've got that in now. So now I'm adding my clear resin with the silver leaf into it, into the middle of that. Now that's going to spread out, and it will mix with the blue, but it'll give the lovely striations to it that mica tends to do, and it'll just be slightly more feathered look. So it'll be darker on the outsides, and then it'll gradually get slightly paler and more translucent as we get towards the centre, where you'll have a clear centre, hopefully, showing the beauty of the silver leaf. So now I've put that in, I've just gone back round and added the rest of the blue resin. So I've topped it up. Now, because these are coasters and I want them to be heat resistant, I'm not filling my moulds up to the top. I am leaving a gap because I want to be able to put a top coat on of heat resistant resin, which you will see later in the film. So I went over with my heat gun, and then just for added security of no bubbles, give them a quick blast with some 99.9 isopropyl alcohol. So I left them to harden up overnight, and then the next day I've come back. You only need to leave them, you don't have to be fully cured to be able to do a top coat. You just need to leave them until they're firm enough that adding your top coat isn't going to push through the resin. You want it to sit on top of the resin, so it needs to be partially cured. Doesn't have to be fully cured though. So, and for the heat resistant resin, I'm using Resin Glory's Epoxy Resin. Now that is heat resistant up to 93 degrees Celsius, more than enough to put a hot drink on. So to that, because I love my sparkle and bling, I've just added a small amount of iridescent glitter. Now it's not a lot, it's just enough just to give that extra sparkle. So, and now again, I'm going round adding some to each one. Now, this is the first time I've used this mould, and I'm not entirely sure how much it's going to hold. So I made up 100 mils of the resin. It's a 1-to-1 resin, so it's 50 mils of each. Sorry, no, it's in grams. It's by weight, not volume. So it's 50 grams of each, and it makes 100 mils. I think that's the right way around anyway. So I've poured all that in, and I'm just using my heat gun again just to help warm it up, disperse any bubbles. Now I do have a heat mat that I keep my resin on before I use it, so it's above room temperature. It's not really warm. It's not as warm as it would be if I used a water bath, but my studio is in the garden, and I can't be bothered basically to walk back and forth with my resin bottles. I don't want to keep them in the house. I want to keep them in my studio, and I can't be bothered to walk out, bring them over, let them sit before I work, then go back, take them back across with me and get to work. So I just use my heat mat, and it does the trick. As you can see, I've not made quite enough up. So what I'm doing here is I'm making another 80 grams in total. So that's 40 of each. Actually, no, it's millilitres. I was right originally. It is millilitres. I've not got my weighing scales out, so it's in millilitres because that's a gradiated cup. So it's got the lines on giving you the measurements in mils. So I'm just filling that up, making it up, and then I'm going to be adding some glitter to it again. But rather than you have to sit through me doing all this, what I'm going to do is speed it up for you. When I'm editing my videos, I use a program called Canva. Now, it only allows me to speed it up ×2. If anybody knows a way to make it speed up faster than ×2, please leave a comment down below and let me know how I can make it speed up faster, because I can only get it to speed up ×2. I can't get it to speed up any faster. And just while we're going through that, I'll also say the reason I'm doing a voiceover is because I'm using resin. So I have my respirator mask on as well as my gloves, because I don't want to be mixing it and breathing in any of the fumes from the resin. Not that I've smelt any from them, but better to be safe than sorry. So I have my respirator on, so you wouldn't be able to hear me. I sound like something off Star Wars, probably Chewie, trying to speak through that, which is funny, but not great for people to be able to understand me when I'm doing a video. So I've also got my gloves on, which again is really important to protect you from the chemicals. The respirator also stops me being able to breathe in any of the tiny particles from the mica powder, because they are not good for your lungs. Your lungs are not meant to deal with mica powder. So it not only saves me from any fumes or chemicals from the resin, it also stops me breathing in any of the mica powder. As you can see, I'm just finishing mixing the resin with the glitter in, and I'm just going to top up what's left in there. And as I'm working, I can see that I'm working on a board, but the resin is moving slightly to one side, so one of my sticks has moved. So I've just readjusted my sticks to make sure my board's nice and level, and now I'm topping up with the rest of the heat resistant resin. I'm just giving it a spread with the stick to make sure it's all around the edges. Hello, I'm back. So these have been left to cure overnight. So now I'm going to demold them. So they've got their heat resistant top coat on them, and it's all nice and hard. How sparkly it is, and just as beautiful on the other side. So there's a little bit of overflow on that one, which I'll take off. But again, just as sparkly. And a little bit of overflow just there. Right, so I'll just get my tool for taking that down. When I remember where I've put it. So to take off the overflow, I'm going to be using my deburring tool. So that's what it is. It's on Amazon. I think it's about 11 or 12 pounds. So So you can see that's already taken most of it off. Just a little bit more. And I'm going to be edging these, so I'm not worried about the white showing from where I've removed the resin. There we go, and that's all nicely gone now. And I'll do the same on this one. There we go, that's all gone now. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip them all over like that, and then I've got these little silicone dots, the 3M ones. You can just pick them up off Amazon or eBay, and they just stop your coasters from scratching your table. Just raises them up ever so slightly. I'm just putting 4 on each one. and I'm putting them into the blue section so that they're not seen through. And these silicone dots are very inexpensive, they're just a few pounds for a couple of sheets of them. So now that's done, and flip them back over, and they all stand very slightly off the surface. So now I'm going to go around and edge in my silver pen, and the one I'm using is the Uni Paint marker in silver. It's a nice pen, gives a lovely silver colour, and you just need to press down to get the colour to come through. So now I'm just going to go around the edge, and it'll just highlight the silver leaf that's inside the coaster. And if you can make a mistake, you can wipe it off straight away, and it's as if it never happened. If you leave it there and come back to it, you will need to apply a little bit of alcohol to it. And by outlining it, it also highlights the shape of this lovely geode coaster. And all I'm doing is putting the tip slightly on the top, and the rest of it is down the side. So I get a thin line round the top, and it just edges on the side, and then I can go in and colour all of the side. It gives great coverage, this one, and it's beautiful shiny silver. Now these irregular geode coasters take slightly longer than it would for, say, a round or a square one, just because of all the dips and curves along the edge. So there's no great rush, just take your time. And if your pen starts to feel a bit dry, just press down and it'll get the ink flowing again. There we go. So now we have a lovely shiny silver edge, edged on the top, and a beautiful glossy surface that shines and twinkles with that extra glitter that we put in, and the Mica powder, and looks absolutely beautiful. I will show you the finished results on the last three with some pictures, and I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for now. Take care. Bye bye.